And welcome back, everyone, to the Pokemon Team Creation Series. Today's Pokemon Team Creation Series suggestion comes to us from the KF_Azier, who asked the question, what is Green Lantern, specifically Hal Jordan's Pokemon team? Lanterns are a weird group to do this series with. I have not yet done any Lantern Corps member from any of the corps yet. So Hal Jordan's the first, and while working on this team, and I did eventually figure out a team, otherwise I wouldn't do the damn video, I did realize a very unique problem that I'll touch upon in a little bit. What do we know about Hal Jordan? No, he was a fighter pilot. He obviously gained the Green Lantern Corps, Green Lantern Ring of Will. He's one of the most famous Green Lanterns there is. He's, despite all of his power, he's a bit of a beat cop. The Ring can kind of just do anything he wants, more or less, as long as his willpower is high enough and strong enough. So I wanted to work with his backstory before going into the Lantern Ring. And my initial thought was, what kind of Pokemon would you have if you're a fighter pilot? Like, what Pokemon represent that? And there's two Mon that came to mind. One is the actual plain Pokemon, the fighter Pokemon, Latios. I went with Latios over Latias because I believe he's considered the big brother to the little sister to Latias. So, just because he's the male one of the group, I just figured that I think technically they're not gendered. I think. Let me check that real quick, because most legendary Pokemon are genderless, but there are legendary Pokemon that do in fact have genders. So let me just confirm that real quick. Is Latios and Latias, do they have genders or not? Point being, obviously they're fighter, based off fighter jets. Dragons and fighter jets put together. So it would make sense that a fighter pilot would most likely have this Mon on their team. I could see this being one of those Mons that he kind of acquired later on. He didn't have it as a fighter pilot. So let me see here. Latios. Does Latios have an actual gender, or is it genderless? Let's find out today on Jeopardy. Boo-doo-doo-doo. There we go. So Latios, yep, no, I was right. It actually is. It's 100% male. They're always male. Latioses are male. Latioses are female. Okay, cool. But what would he have had prior to getting Latios? Like, obviously, Latios is the actual plane. Who exactly would he have had, like, say, as his co or something like that? And I thought, I knew I wanted to be a flying Pokemon because we saw in one of the anime episodes an old fighter pilot, not a fighter pilot, but an old pilot had a Noctowl as his partner and his navigator almost. So what kind of flying Pokemon do I think fits Hal pretty well? Surprisingly, that became a bit of a difficult. There's a lot of flying Pokemon, but something that someone in the military might have, a bit of a hothead, something like that. I ultimately went with Braviary, eh? It's based off of Bald Eagle, the American bird, there we go. The American bird, or the national bird of America, more or less. The fact he's in the military, maybe he had a rufflet, grew up during training, evolved into a Braviary. And so, he's got Uncle Sam on his side. I like that idea. I think that works well with him. Because he's not necessarily non-patriotic. He's just not a real patriotic guy. Or not, let me rephrase that. It's not that he's not patriotic. It's just that's not a defining feature of him. He's not Captain America, is what I'm trying to say. There's also the aspect of being a superhero. Like, just straight superhero. Now, we do have, by all accounts, a superhero Pokemon with Palafin. But if I were to do every superhero team I ever do, it gets a little boring. And plus, Palafin doesn't really fit with Hal very well. So I'm like, okay, what other superhero kind of esque Pokemon do we have? And we do have Gallade. Now, Gallade also works because the Ralts line is very intuitive and very in tune with emotions. Now, they're in tune with a lot of emotions and different emotions, but because of that, and will apparently counts as an emotion. Never understood that, by the way, how willpower is an emotion. I really don't think that's how that works. But you can make an argument more it goes towards courage. That could be considered an emotion. So maybe they should rename the Lantern Corps the Green Lantern Corps of Courage. That would work. But regardless, it still works off of willpower and all that. But yeah, and he's got the green in there, so he got a little bit of an aesthetic appeal as well. Now, the Lantern Ring itself. This is what I said earlier, where I've never done a Lantern Corps team member, to the best of my to the best of my knowledge. I'd have to backtrack, but I'm pretty sure I haven't. The Lantern Corps, because they're all derived from certain emotions, you can kind of work with the idea of what if we got Pokemon that represented those emotions. Because there's really nothing in Pokemon that represents a Lantern Ring on its own. All the effects the Lantern Ring generally has, at least the base effects, no construct creation. There's nothing that really represents that in Pokemon. Unless you're going with like certain specific abilities, like stealing Lantern Core energy with like an orange ring, or hypothetically raising the dead with a black ring. Yeah, I'm trying to think about like throwing out acid, vomiting like acidic acid, or vomiting acidic vomit with the Red Lantern ring. There's abilities most of the rings have. But because they're all part of a core emotion, you would probably just be focusing on Mon that represent that core emotion. Which for a lot of these, fear, rage, love, hope, so forth and so on, almost all of these are far easier to do in terms of Lantern Rings in Pokemon than the Lantern of Will. Will is a surprisingly, shockingly hard Lantern Ring to figure out Mon that represent that. Because when you think about it, and again, if I were just use an example, I can think of plenty of Mon that are scary as hell and represent fear, no problem. Mon that are driven by their anger, no problem. Mon that represent love, easy. Life, no problem. Death, forget it. Like, there's greed even. Like, there's all the other even compassion, I can probably figure that out for. Will, though, because that's what I'm talking about. Will's not really an emotion. I don't understand why they include that. You could have just done the Green Lantern Corps of Courage. It's just bravery and will are what power it. And to be fair, will plays a factor in all the Lantern Corps to some degree. Like your will, it kind of shapes what you're making. It's just the emotional fuel is something else. So I'm like, okay, to use will effectively, I have to think of Pokemon that represent strive, overcoming adversity, standing up in the face of fear, kind of. I have to think of Mon that work that way. And I came down with this. First up, I have Lucario. Now, Lucario, when I think will, I do think fighting types, because it takes a lot of hard work and training to basically grow into your final evolution. Now, technically, you can make the argument for any Mon that doesn't have a trade, stone, or alternate evolution, just leveling up type of evolution, that it's the same thing there. But because fighting types are very physical, constantly training, pushing themselves, I think that works a bit better. And Lucario is one that's always represented as a kind of good... Lucario is one of those Mons you can easily insert onto most teams, and it doesn't seem forced. Add on the fact that because it does manipulate aura, it can fire off aura energy, sense aura. That can, at least in part, be a stand-in for the Lantern Ring's ability to create constructs and energies, so forth and so on. Beyond that, though, now I had to think about, okay, Mon that really, really like struggle hard to achieve their ultimate goal of getting stronger and so forth. I went with Urshifu, particularly the Rapid Strike Water form. A, dark type. There is one dark type. We haven't gotten to him yet. But B, we know that Urshifu, at least in the Isle of Armor, you had to get that damn thing all the way up to level 70 before you could even earn the scroll to evolve him. Now, luckily, if you get the scroll, you can evolve. Like when I got my Urshifu in Scarlet, I was going to say Scarlet and Violet, but I only have Scarlet. It's I was able to eventually get the scroll from that guy, and I just evolved him right there. So that's fine. But the idea of Urshifu is that hard training, all that pays off in the end. And so I do like that as a allegory towards willpower as a whole. But the last one on the team, and bear with me, but King Gambit. King Gambit, I think, makes a lot of sense due to the nature of what it requires for a Bisharp to turn into one of these things. You not only have to have the leader's crest, you have to have the leader crest on you and beat 3 other Bisharp that are with other Poniards are bishops. You're not just beating other mon in the same type. You're beating other mon in the same species while in front of others. So yeah, like that takes an enormous amount of commitment, willpower, training, and at the end you get a pretty cool mon. So yeah, and a pretty good mon too. Like King Gambit is actually really good, especially if you use him last in your party like you should, and then he's the last one out, and basically gets the pump for all your defeated mon. He's a very good mon. And he's got good stats too. Like he's not like broken, but he's got good stats. I don't know. Even though the throne moves with him thing I find a little stupid, ultimately I still like what they did here. So that I think is my team for Hal Jordan. Now, that said, how balanced is the team? As always. Well, what do we got here? We got a normal flying type that would make him weak to electric, ice, and rock. We got a dragon psychic type, which is weak to fairy, dragon, ice. It would most likely go neutral to bug, I think, and dark as well. But and ghost. Now I think about it, yeah, Latios actually has a fair bit of weaknesses now that I think about it. Then you have Urshifu, a water fighting type, which means he's got a weakness to psychic, a weakness to, no special resistance or no weakness to ghost, but can't hit ghosts with fighting type moves. Electric, grass. Again, without going into the neutral categories at all. I know water has one other weakness too. Electric, grass. What's the other weakness of water again? I could have sworn it has another weakness, and it's bothering me that I can't remember it. What would have been? It would have been, no, you know what? Maybe water doesn't have another weakness. Could have sworn it had another weakness. Sometimes I think flying is a weakness to water, but as far as I know, that's actually not true. And you'd think ice would be strong against water, seeing as it is just frozen water, but no. So yeah, you get the fighting types. The fighting type there. You got Lucario, who again fighting is weak to fire, ground, fire, steel. So fire, ground, fighting. And fairy. That was the other thing for fighting. Fairy. Its fairy weakness is mitigated by the steel weakness, definitely. So it's got that advantage, but it's not saved from psychic. It is safe from flying, though, so there is that. Then you have King Gambit, again, weak to fire, ground. Basically, all of Steel's main weaknesses, it's weak to, because Dark, unfortunately, doesn't resist any of the main weaknesses of Steel, which, again, I believe is just fire and fighting. So, yeah, firefighting and ground. That's it, yeah. And, in fact, it's quad 4 weak to fighting. Add-on bug, the steel would resist that, fortunately, which is good for that. But, at the end of the day, does that really matter? Someone just comes in with a fighting type. And then you have Gallade, who, again, being a psychic fighting type, would be weak to fairy, psychic, flying, dark, bug, and ghost. So, how balanced is this team? Actually fairly balanced, all things considered. The only typing that poses a real problem for this team on any strong level is fairy, and that is because every mon on this team minus Braviary has at least a type in their combination that is weak to fairy. Now, luckily, you do have the steel coverage there to resist fairy with both King Gambit and Lucario, but that's still at least half the team at least neutrally weak or base weak to fairy. And that's not good, and particularly because any dragon type move that Latios has, or any of these guys have, because some of these guys can learn them, is going to be just completely negged by a fairy type. Ghost does pose a little bit of a problem. This is just due to the fact that Braviary being normal means any normal type moves it has isn't going to do anything. It will be able to hit Latios and Gardevoir for at least base damage of ×2. And fighting types also pose a mild problem for the team, just because 2 of the team members have type weaknesses against fighting. One of them is a quad weak. But still, the only real serious problem this team runs into is with fairy types. That really does seem to be the only serious one. And again, that is only about half the team, which still isn't great, but is enough that you can say it's not going to bring the team completely down. Still, though, that's just my opinion, though. And this is my opinion for the team. Let me know in the comments below what you think. How much do you like this team? Let me know what you would do different if you do anything different. But thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Like, comment, share, subscribe, and I'll see you next time.